Captain John Mitchell rubbed his eyes and looked at the view screen again, hoping what he saw would somehow change. It didn't. Massive alien warships stretched across the darkness of space like a steel wall, their hulls gleaming with weapons that could probably vaporize his colony ship in seconds. Each battleship was easily the size of Manhattan, bristling with energy cannons and launch bays that were already spitting out smaller fighter craft. "Well, this is new," John muttered, taking a sip of his coffee. The mug read "World's Okayest Captain," a gift from his daughter before they left Earth. Navigation Officer Lisa Parker was frantically checking her instruments, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed star maps and jump calculations. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she cross-referenced their position with known star charts. "Captain, I'm reading our location as Sector 7 Alpha Gamma. That's nowhere near where we're supposed to be." Her voice cracked slightly. "We should be 3 systems away from here, approaching Kepler 442b. The bridge of the New Horizon buzzed with quiet activity. The colony ship carried 300 families seeking a new life on a distant world, along with all their hopes and dreams packed into cargo holds. Now those dreams seemed very far away as alien vessels closed in around them. Chief Communications Officer Rachel Brooks looked up from her station, her face pale. "Sir, I'm getting multiple hails on all frequencies. The translation software is working overtime, but the gist seems to be, 'surrender or die,' repeated in about 12 different alien languages." Through the view screen, John could see the alien ships more clearly now. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, sleek predators of the void with hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols glowed along their sides, probably writing in languages humans had never seen. Some ships had massive rotating sections, others bristled with spike-like protrusions that hummed with barely contained energy. Engineer Tom Roberts whistled low as he watched his sensor readings. "Captain, these ships are reading power signatures I've never seen before. Whatever drives they're using, it's not fusion or antimatter. It's something else entirely." The largest vessel, a behemoth that dwarfed even the other massive ships, began moving toward them. Its hull was covered in what looked like living metal that rippled and flowed like liquid mercury. Strange creatures could be seen moving along its exterior, maintenance beings or perhaps symbiotic life forms that helped operate the ship. "Incoming transmission," Rachel announced. "It's coming from the big one." The view screen flickered and suddenly showed the interior of an alien bridge. The beings looking back at them were tall and imposing, with scales that shifted color from deep blue to silver. Their eyes were large and multifaceted like jewels, and they wore what appeared to be ceremonial armor covered in glowing circuits. "Primitive vessel," came the translated voice, deep and resonating. "You have violated the sacred space of the Draconian Empire. Surrender immediately or face total annihilation." The alien speaking had 4 arms, each ending in hands with too many fingers. Behind him, John could see other creatures, some humanoid, others clearly not. A floating jellyfish-like being drifted past, its translucent body pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Robotic servants with crystalline bodies moved between control stations. John straightened his uniform jacket and reached for the microphone with the same casual motion he might use to answer his doorbell. "This is Captain Mitchell of the human vessel New Horizon. We seem to have taken a wrong turn somewhere. Could you direct us to the nearest gas station? We're running a bit low on deuterium." The silence that followed was so complete that John could hear the soft hum of the ship's life support systems. Even his own crew stared at him in disbelief. Lisa Parker slowly turned in her chair. "Sir, did you just ask a galactic empire for directions to a gas station?" "Seemed polite," John shrugged, setting down his coffee mug. The alien commander on the screen appeared to be having some kind of conversation with his crew. Their translator picked up fragments, something about unprecedented response and possible mental deficiency in the species. Tom Roberts leaned over to the ship's psychologist, Dr. Kevin Murphy. "Doc, is the captain having some kind of breakdown? Because this seems like the worst possible time for it." Dr. Murphy shook his head, studying John with professional interest. "Actually, I think he's just being himself. Some people panic in crisis situations. Others get very, very calm." More alien ships were arriving now, emerging from what looked like tears in space itself. These newcomers were different, sleeker, with organic curves that suggested they were grown rather than built. Living ships, perhaps, with crews of beings that defied human imagination. "Captain," Rachel said quietly, "they're powering up weapons. All of them." John nodded thoughtfully and picked up the microphone again. The alien commander was still visible on screen, apparently waiting for some kind of proper terror response from the humans. Look, John said conversationally, I know this looks bad. 300 human families accidentally dropping into your backyard without an invitation. But we're peaceful folks. We've got kids on board who are probably pressed against the windows right now thinking your ships look really cool. How about we just grab some fuel and head on our way? We'll even pay for it. Engineer Tom Roberts whispered urgently, Sir, I don't think they have gas stations. John glanced at him with a slight smile. Well, worth asking, right? Admiral Vex of the Draconian Empire's Third Fleet stared at his communications panel in complete bewilderment. In his 200 years of military service, he had conquered 17 star systems and brought 43 different species to their knees. He had seen enemies beg for mercy, witnessed entire civilizations collapse at the mere sight of his fleet, and heard the death screams of 1,000 worlds echo across the void. But this was something entirely new. These primitive aliens had wandered into the most heavily defended system in the galaxy and were asking for directions like lost tourists. You will surrender immediately, he roared through the translator, his forearms gesturing dramatically while his scaled face flushed from deep blue to angry crimson. You have violated sacred imperial space. Prepare to face the wrath of Emperor Drax. The response that came back through the communication channel was so casual it made his head tentacles twitch with confusion. Look, Admiral. Vex, is it? We're just passing through. We've got 300 families aboard looking to start a new life. How about we just grab some fuel and head on our way? We can pay in rare metals or maybe some of our coffee beans. I hear coffee's pretty popular once folks try it. Admiral Vex turned to his bridge crew, a mix of different species that serve the Empire. His tactical officer was an insectoid creature with compound eyes that could process 17 different spectrums of light simultaneously. The being was frantically analyzing the human ship with every sensor available. Commander Zix, what exactly are we dealing with here? Vex demanded. Commander Zix's mandibles clicked nervously. Sir, the vessel appears to be using primitive fusion drives, basic hull plating, and weapons that wouldn't scratch the paint on our fighters. Their entire ship has less firepower than a single one of our torpedo launchers. Then why aren't they terrified? Vex bellowed, causing several smaller crew members to scurry for cover behind their control stations. Meanwhile, aboard the New Horizon, the human crew was having their own moment of disbelief. Dr. Beth Collins, the ship's medical officer, leaned over to Security Chief Mike Thompson, who was calmly monitoring the defensive systems despite being surrounded by enough firepower to glass a planet. Are we really negotiating with a galactic empire like they're traffic cops? She whispered. Mike grinned, his weathered face creasing with amusement. Seems that way. Though I gotta say their ships are pretty impressive. Look at that big one on the left. It's got some kind of living hull that keeps changing color. Dr. Collins followed his gaze to see one of the alien vessels whose surface rippled like water, shifting between deep purple and silver. Strange bioluminescent patterns pulsed along its length, and she could swear she saw what looked like eyes opening and closing along the hull. That's either really advanced technology or those ships are actually alive, she murmured. Chief Engineer Tom Roberts was at his station, practically bouncing with excitement as his sensors fed him data about the alien fleet. Captain, you need to see this. These ships are using some kind of space-time manipulation for propulsion. And that big carrier over there? It's got a gravitational field generator that's literally bending space around it. On the main view screen they could see inside several of the alien ships through their transparent sections. The diversity was staggering. Creatures that looked like walking coral formations worked alongside beings made of pure energy contained in mechanical suits. Robotic servants with crystalline bodies moved through corridors that seemed to defy physics, running upside down and sideways as if gravity was just a suggestion. One particularly impressive ship had what appeared to be a miniature ecosystem visible through its transparent biodome sections. Floating jellyfish creatures drifted between tree-like structures that grew in spirals, while bird-like beings with metallic wings soared through artificial clouds. Admiral Vex was consulting with his senior staff, trying to understand what kind of species could be so indifferent to overwhelming force. His chief strategist, a blob-like creature that communicated through color changes, was pulsing rapidly through shades of confused yellow and orange. Perhaps they are naturally brave, suggested his weapons officer, a cyborg whose organic parts had been replaced with weapon systems decades ago. Or naturally stupid, muttered Vex. He opened a channel to the human ship again. Primitive beings. Do you not understand? We have 500 warships surrounding you. Each one could destroy your pathetic vessel with a single shot. Captain Mitchell's voice came back, still perfectly calm. That's a lot of ships, Admiral. Must be expensive to maintain a fleet that size. We humans usually just send a Coast Guard cutter for this kind of thing, but I guess when you've got an empire to run, you need to make an impression. Vex's head tentacles began twitching more violently. Several of his bridge crew were now openly staring at their commander, who was clearly having some kind of breakdown. They're treating us like an inconvenience, he whispered to himself. His communication officer, a tall gray being with too many arms, approached cautiously. Sir, should we just destroy them? It would be simpler. But Admiral Vex was beginning to realize that destroying these humans might not solve the mystery of why they weren't afraid. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that seemed genuinely unbothered by overwhelming military superiority. No, he said slowly. I need to understand what we're dealing with here. Prepare my shuttle. We're bringing these strange beings before the Imperial Council. Let Emperor Drax decide what to do with creatures who ask galactic empires for gas station directions. As word spread through the fleet that the humans would be brought before the Emperor himself, alien crews pressed against viewports to catch a glimpse of the beings who had wandered into Imperial space and somehow made Admiral Vex question everything he knew about warfare and intimidation. The throne room of Emperor Drax was a masterpiece of intimidation architecture. Towering pillars of black stone stretched into shadows so deep that even the advanced alien lighting systems couldn't penetrate them completely. The floor was a mosaic of dark materials from conquered worlds, each tile representing a different species that had fallen before the Empire's might. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, glowing with a sickly green light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Impressive architecture, Captain John Mitchell nodded appreciatively as he looked around, his hands clasped behind his back like he was on a museum tour. Reminds me of Westminster Abbey if Westminster Abbey was run by Darth Vader. The human delegation had been escorted through corridors lined with floating guard drones and robotic sentinels that looked like mechanical spiders the size of cars. Their eyes had glowed red as they tracked the humans' movement, weapon systems humming with barely contained energy. Yet John and his crew had walked through it all like they were visiting a fancy hotel. Emperor Drax himself was an imposing figure seated on a throne carved from what appeared to be the fossilized remains of some massive space creature. His scales were deep purple and seemed to absorb light, while his 6 eyes could focus independently on different targets. A crown of crystallized energy floated above his head, crackling with power that could level mountains. You dare mock the Imperial Palace? Drax's voice boomed through the chamber, amplified by hidden speakers and translation devices that made every word sound like rolling thunder. Not mocking at all, John replied, his tone as conversational as if he were commenting on the weather. Just making conversation. We humans appreciate good craftsmanship when we see it. The engineering required to build something like this must have been incredible. How long did it take? The Emperor's royal court, a collection of the galaxy's most feared beings, exchanged confused glances. There was General Kor, a massive warrior whose body was more machine than flesh after centuries of battle. Beside him floated the Imperial Advisor, a being of pure energy contained within a geometric crystal structure. Court scribes that looked like walking trees with metal branches recorded everything with sensors that could detect lies and emotional states. Dr. Beth Collins, the New Horizons medical officer, was quietly scanning the various alien species with her handheld medical tricorder. Fascinating diversity in this room, Captain, she whispered. I'm reading at least 15 different atmospheric requirements being maintained simultaneously. Engineer Tom Roberts was equally amazed by the technology around them. The gravitational field generators alone must require enough power to run a small city, he murmured, making notes on his tablet. And those floating guard platforms are using some kind of anti-gravity I've never seen before. Security Chief Mike Thompson was doing what he did best, assessing threats and exits. 17 visible weapon emplacements, Captain. But the real impressive stuff is probably hidden. This whole room could probably deploy enough firepower to level a continent. Emperor Drax was growing increasingly frustrated with the humans' casual behavior. His court expected visitors to prostrate themselves, to beg for mercy, to at least show some appropriate fear of his absolute power. These creatures were acting like tourists. Perhaps a demonstration is in order, Drax declared, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Bring in the prisoners. The massive doors at the far end of the throne room slid open with a sound like grinding stone. A group of rebel prisoners from a recently conquered world were marched in by robotic guards. The prisoners were clearly terrified, their alien features twisted with fear as they realized what was about to happen. Behold the fate of those who oppose the Empire, Drax announced, raising one of his clawed hands. The execution was swift and carried out by an elegant energy weapon that emerged from the floor. The prisoners were gone in a flash of light, their molecules scattered to atoms in seconds. The weapon then retracted back into the floor as smoothly as it had appeared. The Emperor turned to the humans, expecting to see horror, fear, or at least some acknowledgement of his power. Instead, he found them watching with the same detached interest they might show a nature documentary. "Fascinating energy discharge pattern," observed Tom Roberts, still taking notes on his tablet. "The weapon seems to use some kind of molecular disintegration field. Very clean, very efficient." Dr. Beth Collins had her medical scanner pointed at the area where the execution had taken place. The physiological response was quite remarkable. Complete cellular breakdown in 0.7 seconds. No pain receptors would have had time to register the process. "From an engineering standpoint, it's quite impressive," added Mike Thompson. "The power requirements must be enormous, but the targeting system is precise enough to avoid damaging the floor underneath." Captain Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. "Very advanced technology. Though I have to say, on Earth we've found that rehabilitation programs tend to have better long-term results than executions. But every society has its own approach to justice, I suppose." Emperor Drax stared at the humans in growing alarm. These beings had just witnessed what was meant to be the most terrifying display of imperial power, and they were discussing it like they were reviewing a piece of equipment. Do you feel nothing?" he asked, his voice losing some of its commanding thunder. John considered the question seriously. "Well, I feel sorry for those prisoners. Nobody deserves to die like that. But we humans have seen our share of violence throughout history. We've learned that the best response to cruelty is usually to try to understand it and then work toward something better." The alien court was dead silent. Even the floating advisor's energy patterns had dimmed to almost nothing. Never in the Empire's history had anyone responded to the Imperial execution with clinical curiosity and mild disapproval. Emperor Drax was beginning to realize that these humans might be more dangerous than any army he had ever faced, simply because they refused to be impressed by his power. They were treating his absolute authority like an interesting cultural quirk. "Guards," he said weakly, "return them to their holding chambers. I need time to think." Emperor Drax rose from his bone throne, his 6 eyes blazing with frustration. These humans had shown no proper fear, no respect for his absolute power, and had somehow made his grand execution demonstration look like a boring science lecture. It was time for a more personal approach. "You will face my champion in ritual combat," he declared, his voice echoing through the massive throne room. The alien courtiers around him nodded approvingly. Finally, their emperor was taking the proper action. Surely these soft-looking creatures would cower when faced with the Empire's greatest warrior. Captain John Mitchell looked up from where he'd been examining the intricate carvings on a nearby pillar. He stretched his shoulders and rolled his neck like he was getting ready for a morning jog. "All right. What are the rules?" The court fell silent. Even the floating crystalline advisor dimmed its energy patterns in surprise. This human was accepting a challenge to ritual combat like someone agreeing to play a game of cards. Emperor Drax gestured toward massive doors that opened with a grinding roar. "General Kor. Attend your Emperor." What emerged from those doors was less a person and more a walking tank. General Kor stood 9 feet tall, his original organic body long since replaced with cybernetic enhancements that gleamed under the throne room's lighting. His armor was forged from the hull plating of conquered warships, and his 4 arms each ended in hands that could crush steel. One of his eyes had been replaced with a targeting system that glowed red, while the other was a compound sensor array that could see in 17 different spectrums. "The ritual combat consists of 3 trials," Emperor Drax announced with growing confidence. "Strength, cunning, and will. Failure in any trial means death." Behind John, his crew exchanged worried glances. Dr. Beth Collins whispered urgently, "Captain, that thing could probably bench press a shuttle." "Yeah," John nodded calmly, "but I bet he's never had to move furniture up 3 flights of stairs without an elevator." The first trial took place in an arena that rose from the floor of the throne room itself. Ancient technology reshaped the space, creating a circular chamber with walls of energy. In the center stood 2 massive stone blocks, each weighing several tons. "The trial of strength," Emperor Drax announced. "Move your block to the far side of the arena. First to complete the task wins." General Kor approached his block and simply grabbed it with all 4 arms. His cybernetic muscles whirred and strained, but slowly the massive stone began to move across the arena floor. The sound was like a landslide in slow motion. John walked around his block thoughtfully, examining it from every angle while the alien court watched in confusion. He found what he was looking for, a small depression in the arena floor near the block's base. "Hey, anyone got a lever?" he called out cheerfully. When no one responded, John removed his belt and used it to create a fulcrum point with a piece of broken stone. Then he found a metal rod from the arena's construction and created a simple lever system. With careful application of physics and leverage, he managed to tilt his block enough to get it rolling rather than dragging. While General Core was still pushing his block with brute force, John rolled his to the finish line and gave it a satisfied pat. "Leverage," he explained to the stunned court. "Humans figured it out about 10,000 years ago." The second trial was a puzzle chamber filled with floating geometric shapes, each one pulsing with different colored energy. The goal was to arrange them in a specific pattern to unlock a central crystal. General Core approached this methodically, his enhanced brain calculating thousands of possible combinations per second. His targeting systems analyzed each shape's energy signature while his tactical processors ran probability algorithms. John took a different approach. After watching the puzzle for about 30 seconds, he walked over to the control panel for the chamber and started examining its construction. "What are you doing?" demanded Emperor Drax. "Well," John said, using his multi-tool to open an access panel, "the puzzle is designed to test cunning, right? Most humans would probably try to solve it the intended way, but I'm wondering what happens if we just..." He pulled out a handful of wires and reconnected them differently. The puzzle chamber made a confused beeping sound, then all the geometric shapes arranged themselves into the correct pattern automatically. "Sometimes the best solution is to change the rules," John said with a grin. General Core had been in the middle of his calculations and stood frozen, his forearms still reaching for puzzle pieces that had already solved themselves. The final trial was the most dangerous, a test of mental will. Both combatants were placed in psychic fields designed to break their minds with pure psychological pressure. The alien technology reached into their thoughts, amplifying every fear and doubt. General Core's enhanced mind was immediately assaulted by visions of his greatest failures, his most traumatic battles and scenarios of his own destruction. The psychic pressure was designed to make warriors question everything they believed in. John felt the mental assault begin and immediately started thinking about his mortgage payments back on Earth. The monthly bills, the insurance costs, the property taxes. He thought about the time his water heater broke and flooded the basement right before his daughter's birthday party. "This is nothing compared to tax season," he muttered, his voice steady despite the psychic storm raging around his mind. The alien technology, designed to exploit the fears and traumas of hardened warriors, had no idea what to do with someone whose greatest stress was remembering to file paperwork before April 15th. General Core collapsed from mental exhaustion while John stood there, slightly winded but completely unbroken, probably wondering if he'd remembered to set up automatic bill pay before leaving Earth. Emperor Drax stared at the human captain who had just defeated his greatest warrior through what could only be described as creative stubbornness and completely unconventional thinking. General Core lay unconscious on the arena floor, his massive cybernetic form twitching occasionally as his systems tried to reboot from the psychic overload. The entire throne room was dead silent. Alien courtiers who had witnessed the conquest of star systems and the fall of mighty civilizations couldn't process what they had just seen. A primitive human had defeated their champion not through superior strength or technology, but by treating each challenge like an everyday problem to be solved. "Your species intrigues me," Emperor Drax finally admitted, his 6 eyes focusing on John with something approaching respect. The floating crystalline advisor beside him pulsed with confused energy patterns, its ancient wisdom failing to provide any precedent for this situation. John was checking his watch, probably wondering if they'd missed lunch back on the ship. "Well, humans have always been pretty good at figuring things out as we go along." The Emperor leaned forward on his bone throne, his scaled features showing genuine curiosity for the first time. "I have ruled this galaxy for 3 centuries. I have seen species that could level planets with their minds, warriors who could survive in the vacuum of space, and civilizations that built weapons capable of destroying stars. Yet none of them impressed me the way your people have today." Around the throne room, various alien species nodded in agreement. The insectoid tactical officers clicked their mandibles thoughtfully, while the energy-based life forms dimmed their glow in what might have been their version of bowing. "Join my empire as military advisors," Drax declared suddenly, rising from his throne with surprising grace for such a massive being. "I offer you entire planets to colonize, wealth beyond your species' wildest imagination, and positions of honor throughout my domain. Think of it, your people could help reshape how we approach conflicts across the galaxy." John considered this offer with the same polite attention he might give to a neighbor asking him to help move furniture. "That's very generous, Your Majesty, and I'm honestly flattered. But we've got a colony to establish. 300 families are counting on us to find them a new home, and we're already running behind schedule." The alien court exchanged bewildered looks. Species across the galaxy had fought wars for far smaller opportunities than what their emperor had just offered. Some civilizations had sold their entire populations into slavery for a fraction of the resources now being casually declined. Dr. Beth Collins stepped forward slightly. "Captain, perhaps we should discuss this with the colonists? This is a pretty big decision." John shook his head. "We signed up to find them a peaceful place to raise their kids and grow some crops. Getting involved in galactic politics wasn't part of the deal." As preparations began for the humans' departure, the massive Draconian fleet had to reorganize itself to create a path for the tiny colony ship. Hundreds of warships, each capable of destroying cities, moved aside like ceremonial guards making way for visiting dignitaries. Admiral Vex personally oversaw the escort procedures from his flagship's bridge. His crew, still trying to process everything that had happened, worked with unusual efficiency. Even the ship's AI system seemed confused, running diagnostic checks to make sure their threat assessment protocols weren't malfunctioning. The New Horizon looked almost comically small as it moved through the formation of massive alien vessels. Its hull showed the wear of long travel, and compared to the sleek alien ships with their living metal and energy weapons, it appeared primitive and fragile. But as Admiral Vex watched the human ship prepare to jump to hyperspace, he found himself thinking about how these apparently primitive beings had accomplished something no military force had ever managed. They had made the Empire question itself. "Admiral," his communication officer reported, "the human captain is requesting permission to depart." Vex activated a direct channel to the New Horizon. "Captain Mitchell, before you go, I must ask you something." John's voice came through clearly. "Sure, Admiral. What's on your mind?" Vex paused, struggling with how to phrase a question that had been bothering him since their first encounter. "Tell me, human, does your species fear nothing? In all my years of warfare, I have never encountered beings who could face overwhelming force with such casual confidence." There was a moment of silence, and Vex could imagine the human captain thinking seriously about the question. Finally, John's voice returned, completely sincere. "Well, running out of coffee is pretty terrifying. Have you ever tried to function on a colony ship with 300 people and no caffeine? It's not pretty." He paused thoughtfully. "And nobody wants to deal with the IRS. That's our tax collection agency back on Earth. They're scarier than any alien empire, trust me." Admiral Vex had no idea what to say to that. Around his bridge, alien crew members looked at each other in confusion, trying to understand how tax collectors could be more frightening than weapons capable of destroying planets. The New Horizon activated its jump drive, and space around the small ship began to ripple and distort. The Draconian fleet watched in bewildered silence as the human vessel disappeared into hyperspace, continuing their simple mission of finding a new home for their families. Later that day, Emperor Drax issued a classified decree that would be quietly distributed throughout the Imperial Intelligence Network. "Mark human space as approach with extreme caution, species unpredictable and possibly insane. Recommend diplomatic contact only. Military engagement not advised without extensive psychological preparation of crews." Meanwhile, aboard the New Horizon, Captain John Mitchell was already drafting his official report for the Colonial Administration. Under the section about notable encounters during transit, he wrote, "Made contact with local galactic empire. Leadership seems a bit dramatic but probably decent folks once you get to know them. Recommend establishing trade relations if we ever get back this way. They have impressive technology and might be interested in coffee beans. V&D."